Date a partner with disorganized attachment style, especially if that's not my attachment style. My name is Jason VanRuler. I'm an attachment expert and a therapist. I talk a lot about healthy relationships and attachment and how to get to that place where we have the best kind of relationships that actually help us to heal and be different people and change our legacies. And that's what I want to talk to you about today is what do you do if you're dating someone with a disorganized attachment style? And I think the first place to start is what is a disorganized attachment style? A disorganized attachment style is really a combination of anxious and avoidant, right? So there's 4 attachment styles. Secure, which means we have a lot of stability in relationship. We trust it. Relationships are healthy pretty easily. We don't have to do a whole lot. We just show up. That's the ideal. That's about 50% of the population. Then we have about 20%, which is anxious. And anxious just means, am I secure in the relationship? They're kind of gifted this question of, am I okay? Are we okay? They never really have certainty. And so they're anxious about the relationship. Avoidant, that's about 20% of the population. And so avoidants really see relationships as risks and places where they can get really hurt. And so they tend to run from them. And then disorganized is often the result of having some trauma and some chaos and some abuse in childhood, which basically leads people to be in this place of having some anxious traits and avoidant traits. Maybe put more simply, though, someone with disorganized attachment is going to really desperately want love, and so they're going to run to it. They're going to want reassurance, and then they're going to change their mind and run away from it. And so to be in a relationship with them is kind of this push-pull, right? It's, I want it, but I'm afraid of it. Today I'm in, tomorrow I'm out. Today, and it can oscillate a lot even in a day. And so really the first thing I want to say about this is, I read a lot of the feedback that I get from people who watch my stuff, and I talk about disorganized attachment. And one of the things that I hear the most often that I really don't like and want to just speak out against is a lot of people say, well, if you've got disorganized attachment style, the best thing you can do is just not date. You just somehow adopt this life of just aloneness and singleness because it's for the greater good. And so if you've got disorganized attachment, what you ought to do is just be alone because that'll help everybody else out. And I just want to say this is absolutely not true. I don't agree with it. I think there's a lot of hope. I think people who have disorganized attachment style actually bring a ton to relationships. They're resilient people. They're steadfast. They persevere. They've got grit. So they've got a lot of things that are really important to relationship and could actually teach people how to be better in relationship. But they've also got some things that they are going to have challenges with. And let's be honest, don't we all have challenges in relationships? So I just want to paint a picture for you. If you are in a relationship with someone who's got disorganized attachment, that brings with it both benefits and consequences, as any relationship does. But let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. And really the thing that is probably most important to note, first and foremost, is that to be in a relationship with someone with disorganized attachment means you're always going to wonder where you stand if you're not careful. And the reason for that is because it's kind of like the floor is always moving, right? And so we're here today, we're there now, we're there now. And so everything is changing all the time, right? There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of stability, even though maybe there is for the disorganized person. What they're communicating, what their actions are reflecting, make it sometimes hard to see that. And so when we're in this position, if you're someone who's securely attached, this is going to be a little abrupt for you. And you might even say, oh, I've got a little bit of whiplash here because I just thought we were okay and now we're not okay. And what do I do about that? If you're anxiously attached with someone who's disorganized, some days it's going to be passion and you're going to be the most connected ever because in your anxious moments, you're going to see each other the way nobody's ever seen you before, but you're going to be so activated when they do the avoidant thing and then they pull back, right? And same with avoidant. If you're avoidant with someone who's disorganized, on one hand, both feeling avoidant at the same time is going to be a connection like you've never had before, but then the anxious part is going to throw you off a little bit. And so just know whatever attachment style you have, disorganized is going to be a combination which sometimes lines up. Sometimes that's going to make you stronger together. Other times, though, it's going to make you really question where you're at and what's happening. And so the biggest thing that you have to figure out how to do in a relationship with someone who's disorganized is how to be yourself authentically and how to really stand in that position. And it's going to sound odd, but to kind of be the stable person for the relationship. And what that means is that you anchor the relationship by being yourself. It's not your job to control the other person's feelings or thoughts or make them different. But just by being authentically you and being honest and clear about where you stand and what you believe and what you want is going to be so helpful to that disorganized person. Now, a framework that I like to use when I'm working with people who've got this sort of setup where one person is disorganized, one person isn't, is the CARE framework. And so I'm going to walk you through the CARE framework because I think it could be so helpful for you to kind of be keeping this in mind. But the first part of CARE is C, right? And so the first step in being in a relationship with someone who's got disorganized attachment is we want to cultivate safety and stability. And why that's important is that because people with disorganized attachment often fear abandonment, but they also fear intimacy. And so we want to create a secure environment for them that feels safe enough to take the steps to heal and connect. And so some steps along with that would just be to be consistent in your words, actions, and presence. Your words carry a lot of weight. And so if you tell this person something, stick to it. If you don't know, say you don't know, but resist the urge to make a commitment to something you're not actually going to stick with, because that takes away from safety. Next, I want you to try to avoid reactive behavior and try to stay calm. Now, this is really easy to say because sometimes we're super activated ourselves. And so one thing along the way is like, it's not your job to be their therapist. I'm going to give you some things you can try that I think are just good relationship things, but especially in this situation. But you don't have to be their therapist. So your job is not to control their behavior. Your job is not to make them different. It's just to show up in a way that lends itself to the healthiest possible relationship. So we're going to try to avoid being really reactive and try to stay calm during conflict. And then we want to set clear, predictable boundaries, which is going to foster security. Now, what it can feel like sometimes is to put a boundary out there for someone with disorganized attachment is to push them away. And it might initially, but trust me on this, they're actually going to appreciate that because they know where they stand with you. And ultimately, that's one of the things they wanted most, is just to be able to know where they stand with people. The A is to acknowledge their inner conflict. There is something so important about being seen in our struggle. And we don't always get that. And so one of the things you can do is acknowledge their inner conflict. What must that be like for them to feel conflicted between wanting closeness and pushing it away? Noting this internal struggle and just saying, like, I see you, giving some empathy and compassion around that is really important for them, because sometimes they feel like no one gets it, right? Or maybe they felt like no one ever got it. And so just acknowledging that is really healthy by giving empathy and validation. And then also see that their push-pull beliefs and mentality is actually a reflection of their past more than it is of today. That's sort of a relic they're carrying with them. That's what they were trained to do, and so they're doing what they've been trained to do, no matter how inefficient it is. But just understand, like, that's actually the thing that lends itself to seeing who they are and how they grew up. That's what they experience. So we can have compassion for that. And then we want to encourage open conversations about how they're feeling and what's going on inside them without judging it. And the reason I say without judging it is because we might hear things that we wholeheartedly disagree with, right? They might say things like, well, I just feel like you don't really care about me. And you might go, hey, I'm here, we're talking, like, this is really hard for me. And here I am. And how could you think that? And what's wrong with you? And that whole judgment piece is not going to be helpful. So if you can't hear their feelings and listen to them and let them be their feelings, not your opinion, if you can't do that, don't. But the goal is, if you can listen to some of that and not judge it, but just let them walk through that and kind of say, like, hey, does this make sense to you? How do you get there? Give me some evidence. Like, if you can help them through that process and facilitate that, you're going to be helping them to see that they have a different relationship than the one they feel they have. Next is we want to regulate emotions together. And again, kind of depending on your attachment style, if you're securely attached, congratulations, you just kind of be securely attached, and that's going to help a lot. But what I call this is role modeling. And so we just want to role model healthy regulation of emotions. And so we'll just model that, right? So when you're having a disagreement and you do some self-care stuff, you're like, I need to, take a few breaths, or I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to take a little time and journal about that. Like, all of those things help the other person to regulate because they see you doing it. And so it's really important to just be a healthy person. To be with someone who's got disorganized attachment style is just saying, I'm committing, because I want to be in this relationship, to working towards my healthiest self. And when my healthiest self shows up, we're more likely to be good. Next, you want to support them in recognizing and managing what activates them or what triggers them, might be a word that you use. Because there are going to be things. I consider these things like sunburns. If I'm sunburned on my shoulder and you come up and you don't know, and you say, hey, Jason, and you tap it, I have this big reaction. That's kind of what being triggered's like, is the person who touched it goes, well, I had no idea because I didn't see it. And sometimes we don't even know, right? But we have this big reaction because it really hurts, even though it wasn't obvious. And so you can be helpful to them by seeing, like, what are the things that trigger? Like, hey, whenever we talk about your family, it seems like that is really generating a big response from you, or it seems like that's really triggering. What is that about? Or can we talk about that? Or do you want to talk to your therapist about that? And then practice co-regulation techniques. You can do things together. You can meditate together, you can do yoga together, you can do all of these things together. And sometimes you'd be amazed at just inviting this other person into your own self-care practice for themselves, how much of an impact that makes, because they just haven't had anybody to do that. And then lastly, E is encourage growth and healing. A relationship is a great safe container for healing, but individual work is going to be really important. And again, you're not their therapist, right? You're their partner. And so you're willing to try to make it easy for them to have a healthy relationship, or easier, but it's not your job to be me, right? Unless that's what they hired you for, and that's weird, and that's a whole separate conversation, but you're not their therapist. So we want to encourage them to continue to do their individual work, which is probably with the therapist, right? And then to have their own community of people who are going to help them to get better and to heal. All roads can't lead to you. If everything leads back to you as being the person who's going to get them out of this and fix them and heal them, you're going to be exhausted, and they're probably not going to be as grateful as you'd like them to be, because it's just not going to work that way. What's going to happen is you're going to turn into that caregiver that they've had this relationship with, that it's going to be really challenging, because you're going to go, I'm trying to care for my partner, and I'm trying to be a parent to my partner that they never had. And that's not really how we want an adult relationship to work. And it's also just not efficient. So what I want you to really look at this as is, I'm not your parent. I'm so sorry you didn't get the parents you needed, but I'm not your parent, I'm your partner. And as your partner, I'll help you as much as I can. I'll make it easy as much as I can. I'll invite you along. We'll try to be healthy, but you got to do your own work. And when you do your own work and I do my own work, we show up better together. And then we want to just have some patience, because again, we're getting into this knowing that there's some issues. And so one thing I'll talk to couples about is, like, did you know that this was a struggle when you got started? And they'll say yes. And then I'll say, well, here we are, right? So if you know there's this struggle, we can have some patience and compassion for, hey, I kind of knew this getting into it, right? If you're running a marathon and 10 miles in, you go, I've got shin splints and I don't feel very well, and this is really, really hard. No one's surprised, because we all go, well, you wanted to run a marathon. Like, what did you think would happen? And if you said, well, I just thought like I'd feel amazing the whole time and it would be easy, most people go, why did you think that? Like, this, you're running a marathon. There's some inherent challenges. So sometimes just normalizing being challenged by this makes sense, because again, it's a little bit of a difficult situation. And then what we need to do is just have boundaries to protect our own well-being along the way. So the truth is, not every relationship works out. Disorganized, secure, anxious, no matter what it is, not every relationship works. And so what I want you to really be cautious about is just not to lose yourself in this relationship and abandon yourself to the point that you have nothing left, and then you have to kind of exit immediately because you're hurting so badly. So keep those boundaries and say, like, hey, I'm willing to help, but we're going to have some minimum standards. There's going to be some things that we're going to agree to about how we treat each other and who we are in this relationship. And if we're not able to do that, we're going to have some serious discussion about what to do next. Okay, all of this is to say, this will make you better as a person if you do these things. And these aren't just like disorganized attachment things. These are like things that just make you better anyway. But it is going to be a grind some days, and it's okay to just say, like, hey, today it's really hard to be in this relationship because of some of these challenges. That's not to say you're a bad person, but today this whole disorganized secure thing or disorganized anxious thing is really hard for me. And I love you, and it's hard. And so can we just normalize that it's tough? And sometimes just doing that goes so far, because they go, yeah, I bet it is hard. I understand it's hard for me too. I bet it is hard for you. Thank you for having patience and compassion. When we do this, we can show up as our best self. The thing, again, that I want you to avoid is you don't have to be the savior. And so if you are listening to this because you think it's your job to fix the other person or to save them or rescue them, I'm just here to say, A, that's not your job, and B, you're probably not going to do it. And this is the reason why. Even as a therapist, I used to want to save people all the time. Like, that was my thing, is if I could save enough people and make them okay, then I'd feel better. But the deal is, we can't make people willing who aren't. And so, will a relationship with someone who's got disorganized attachment work, and is there hope? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But it's all contingent on one thing: their willingness and your willingness to do the work. If there is not willingness from both of you, we're going to be stuck. And so as I end this, I just want to say, like, be willing and find someone who's willing, and we can do amazing things if we're pointed in the same direction. But be very cautious and hesitant if you are willing and they are not. It is not your job to sell them on a healthier life if they don't want it. It just isn't. And maybe it's just not the right time for them, or maybe it'll never be the right time. But just know, like, you are not a salesperson coming in to sell someone on being saved. You're looking for a partner. And that's a totally different thing. So if you're in this, just know I feel for you, because I get there's some inherent challenges. I also love that you're trying to be better and be better in your relationship. I would also just encourage you, keep learning, keep growing, keep finding new ways to show up for yourself and for them, and pursuing health. I respect the heck out of people who are trying to better their relationships, because goodness, that's why I do what I do. So thank you.